Do you wave your terrible towel when Renegade plays? Reach for a tasty cake when JJ shouts, "He scores!" Does the sound of an F1 engine make your heart race? Doing push-ups with the Nittany Lion after a TD? Then lend us an ear, and we will share the exhilaration of Steelers football, the excitement of Flyers hockey, the nail-biting finishes of F1, and the pride when we yell, "We are Penn State." Welcome to the SteelFlyers show, the strangest combination of sports fandom since pineapple was put on pizza. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the SteelFlyers All Sports Network, and boy, oh boy, have we got a very, very special guest for you all lined up today. That's right, folks, the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers from NBC Sports Philadelphia, Jim Jackson. How you doing, Jim?
Doing well. How are you, Steel?
Oh, man, I tell you what, I'm doing great, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to bring you on so we can kind of do a little bit of seasonal wrap-up here of the Flyers, kind of what you thought, what you got to see from your firsthand account of being there at the games, calling the games, and then kind of what we want to see with the Flyers and the team moving forward. I would like to kind of get your reactions on some of the press conferences that the coaches and the players had at the end of the season. And then we wanted to see maybe like some potential draft picks maybe that you might be looking at or something towards the future. All right. So we're just going to take it real slow.
Fire away.
Firing away. All right. Philadelphia Flyers were eliminated from the playoffs this year, and unfortunately it was not quite the year that we were all expecting. And well, okay, we've already gone down that road, and I don't want to continue to be a negative Nelly or to continue to bash the team. We already know what's wrong with this team, and now we need to start getting our way to how can we fix this team? How can we make this team make the playoffs this coming season? So, Jim, can you just kind of give me a quick breakdown of what you thought about the Flyer season this year? They started off really, really well. Then COVID hit, and then kind of the wheels kind of fell off. So just give us a quick breakdown of what you thought about the Flyers this season.
Yeah, you started by saying we all know what went wrong with the Flyers this year. I'm all ears. You tell me. It is a mystery to me what happened to this team. I will say in my 28 years now here, it's the most disappointing season I've been through. Not the worst season. There were worse seasons. 06, 07 certainly was worse.
Yeah, the 40th year season was pretty bad too.
Yeah, but if you think about where we were in terms of expectations heading in and where we ended up, it's really disappointing. And the tough part about it is, Ron, I don't really have an answer for you.
Okay.
You say the team started well. Record-wise, they started well, but they weren't playing well even at the start of the year.
Yeah.
They won those early games because they outscored their mistakes, and they got good goaltending. People don't remember that, but actually in the first 10 to 15 games, even though the goalies were giving up 3-4 goals a game, they were playing well. The team was playing poorly defensively, giving up tons of shots, tons of great scoring chances, but they overcame that with good goaltending and by scoring a lot of goals. And so they had a good record when the COVID hit, and that obviously changed everything. There's no doubt that had an impact, but it was not the sole reason because they weren't going on all cylinders even before the COVID hit. So
yeah, I agree.
They really haven't been going on all cylinders since before the pause last year. They were playing extremely well. In fact, went into that pause the second best team in the NHL over a 4-month stretch. So that's not a streak. That's legitimately good. That's over half a season where they were one of the top teams in the league. So with that in mind, and then with what happened this year in mind, it is a big mystery, and Chuck Fletcher has one heck of a decision to make here because, I mean, which team is it? And the players who went downhill were not your veterans. Sean Couturier, Claude Giroux, Jake Voracek, James Van Riemsdyk, Justin Braun, Brian Elliott pretty much played to what you expected them to play to, if not in some cases maybe even a little bit above. But they certainly were not the players who dropped off. The players who dropped off were the people that everyone thought this team was building around. Your Travis Sanheims, your Phil Myers, your Carter Harts, your Travis Konecny's, young players just hitting their prime, not expecting the fallback from these players. Didn't get anything really from Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom. I guess now in retrospect, we should have probably expected that. I think even myself, I thought maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks of that, and then maybe they catch fire. It never really happened. COVID certainly might have gotten in the way of Oscar, but I'm not going to lay anything on Oscar's feet because this guy's, it was a miracle that he played the whole season, and he is one of the bright lights of the season. There's no doubt. And Nolan is a huge, big question mark moving forward now, because what is Nolan Patrick? So we have a lot of real serious questions about this team. And Chuck Fletcher going into this offseason now has to figure out how much stock he puts into the season we just saw. It was a strange year. No fans early, some fans late, a hugely truncated schedule, and then a jam-packed schedule, even more so than most teams because of their COVID outbreak. And no practice time virtually at all, which I think is being used a lot by the coaches as possibly the reason why these young players really never could get their bearings. So how much stock do you put in this season? If you put a lot of stock in it, I think anybody could get moved. If you don't put as much stock in this past season, and you think back to where they were before the pause, one of the better teams in the league, up and coming, young, then maybe there aren't these great moves that everybody's expecting, these big, huge maneuvers. So it's going to be very interesting to see. He's also restricted somewhat by a flat cap. And of course, the expansion draft is going to shape things too. They're going to lose somebody. Who they lose, how much money off the cap they lose in that transaction could also impact where they go. So there are so many variables. My answer in short to your question, I have no idea where they go from here. But it is really an interesting offseason because it could go in any direction.
See, I'm of the ilk, Jim, that this offseason could affect this team for the next 5 to 7 years. And the reason why I say that is this. Because you're looking at generational players like G and Voracek that are coming to the end. Okay. Now, I know that G still is signed for another, 2 years after this year, or one more year after this year. And I think Voracek has at least another year or two left on his deal. Or
G
something.
has one. This is G's last year coming up. Jake is one with that, a couple of extra.
Okay. And Couturier is on a real team-friendly deal. Okay.
Which ends after next year. So
right. So this next off season is why I say this is going to affect the team for the next couple of years, because number one, you have to make a decision on what you're going to do with Voracek. Are you going to expose him or not? Right. Number two.
Yeah, I think you expose him, but his contract probably precludes him from being taken.
Which, who knows, right? I'm with you on that. You know what I mean? Are you going to expose Gostisbehere, or are you going to expose some of the younger guys? You know what I mean? I totally agree with you 100% that the younger guys regressed. Okay. And when I look at the rest of the league and I see the rest of the league still that is dealing with the same situations that the Flyers did, and yet they didn't have some of the same problems that the Flyers did. Excuse me, it makes me kind of question potentially coaching, or potentially some of those moves that Chuck Fletcher made in the offseason last year. You know what I mean? Clearly there was some mistakes made. He even admitted that there were some mistakes made. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah, I'm not sure I would agree with you. Name me a team outside of Minnesota that went through the extended break and then had the accelerated jam-packed schedule that really did well. Dallas tried to make the playoffs, but that's a team that went to the finals last year. They didn't make the playoffs. Buffalo, New Jersey struggled mightily after their code up. Vancouver never got their bearings back. I don't know as if I would agree with you on that. There are teams that had milder breaks, like Washington, that they were able to recover. Pittsburgh didn't have COVID, but they had all kinds of other injuries.
Right.
They were able to get by with it.
St. Louis kind of had a combination of injuries and COVID.
Yeah. Yeah,
Colorado had a combination of injuries.
Colorado had one. Colorado had one, but Colorado's maybe the most talented team.
Well, they actually had two. They had two COVIDs.
Yeah, but their schedule was not until the very end, and they had already clinched a playoff spot.
Yeah,
like the Flyers schedule. I mean, the Flyers played 17 games in 29 days at one point, and when you're a young team, Buffalo's a young team, New Jersey's a young team. Some of these young teams that had these COVID, and then you don't have the practice time. Once things start going in the wrong direction, really tough to right that ship. I have a hard time thinking it's coaching. Lane Vigneault has won 700 games in this league. He's got two very experienced assistants, and then he's got Ian LaPerriere, who is also an experienced assistant coach. I just have a hard time thinking that those guys are the problem. So you mentioned coaching. I didn't agree with everything AV did with some of the younger players. I'll be first to say I think he scratched Phil Myers way too early. I think his failure to at least show some support for Carter Hart, I think might have hurt. But he's also one of the best practice coaches around, and he didn't get to use that. So I think he was kind of hampered by that. We will find out. I mean, next year he's going to have, with all hope, a full training camp and regular practice time during the season. I don't think the leash will be long. After you miss the playoffs, no coach has a long leash, I don't think. But I really have a hard time thinking coaching was the problem with this team.
Okay.
Now, as far as the other move you talked about, the general manager, there's no doubt the Eric Gustafson move did not pan out. And this is not one that many people are saying in hindsight, because I know when that move was made, a lot of people questioned it. I got great reports on Gustafson from somebody like Eddie Olczyk, who saw him play in Chicago. But
right.
The problem with the move wasn't even necessarily what he was going to bring. It's that he was so similar to Ghost, and you couldn't really play both of them. And he wasn't a guy who was going to replace Matt Niskanen. Now, I'm not sure there was anybody out there that was going to replace Matt Niskanen. So it's not like if he didn't get Gustafson, he was going to get somebody who would have made this team better, that they could have fit under the cap. But that move clearly wasn't good. But the fact that he didn't make many moves, the people who are now getting on Chuck Fletcher for his quiet offseason last year, I laugh at, because where was he going to go? This was a young team that was just coming off a 7th-game loss in the second round after being one of the better teams in the league before the pause. Why would he break that up? He wasn't going to make a lot of moves off of that season. So I don't see how you can now. That is absolutely Monday morning quarterbacking when you start saying you should have been more aggressive last year. You can question the Gustafson move in and of itself, but his general approach, not making a lot of changes, if you question that now, you are doing the ultimate in Monday morning quarterbacking.
I feel you on that, but one of the things that I mean, the Gustafson and Braun move were knee-jerk reactions to Niskanen retiring. Okay.
If he didn't do the Braun move, this team would have been even worse. He was a steady defenseman. They had to have somebody, and they didn't overpay for him or anything. So I had no problem with that move, especially after the Niskanen. I don't think the plan was for Justin to be re-signed.
Right.
Because they had defensive depth, but the Niskanen thing was kind of out of the blue. So once that happened, I don't see that as knee-jerk. I saw that as let's get ourselves at least one veteran, and then we'll look for somebody else. Now, the choice of Gustafson as the other one can be certainly questioned.
Okay. That's kind of where my questioning starts, is with that. Okay. And I guess maybe I was expecting too much. I mean, maybe because of how the year ended the previous year, with going to the playoffs and playing that well and not doing as much with this team, with those expectations being much higher, I think, for this coming season, and then them expectations not being met.
Yeah, well, and then we're all disappointed. I said it's
right.
The most disappointing season I've had in 27, 28 years. That's saying something. I mean, I'm completely at a loss to explain how, almost to a T, except for Joel Farabee, the young players stepped backward, not leveled off. They as you said, regressed. And these are talented players. These are players who we know can do it. They've already done it at this level where they've played well. We were hoping they would play even better. But when Travis Konecny, Travis Sanheim, Phil Myers, Carter Hart, those are 4 key young players on this team. I can throw in Nick Aube-Kubel, who's not quite as important a player, but he's another guy who went backwards. And then the 2 that had excuses, but obviously didn't raise their level or couldn't in Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom. Yeah. So we're up to 7 players there. Yeah. That's 7 regular players, including your starting goaltender. That's tough to overcome.
It is, and I'm with you on the Oscar Lindblom thing. I do agree that expectations of the fact that he played for most of the season, that to me was more of, okay, I would just like to see that from Oscar Lindblom.
For sure.
And I'm kind of on the fence that, I'm willing to overlook this year because of coming back from cancer, because of getting the COVID as well for Lindblom. I'm with you on that. The Nolan Patrick thing, Jim, I really would like to see this kid thrive. I really would like to give him a chance. I personally just don't think it's going to be in Philadelphia. I just really think his time is done. I think he was given that prove it deal last year. You know what I mean? And he completely regressed. Now, Chuck Fletcher came out in the press conference and barely said anything and was like, well, he made it through the first season, or made it through a full season. Well, okay, he had 9 points. A number 2 overall draft pick who makes it through a season healthy, that's your yardstick for that. That's hard for me to deal with.
Well, he's a number 2 overall pick who missed more than a calendar year of hockey, so you can't just throw that. You can't just throw that away.
And he's been injured since, even before he was drafted. He had core muscles. He had
there's no doubt he's an injury. But I'm talking about your expectations for this season. And when we talked, I saw him in training camp. He was flying.
Yeah.
So I thought
he was great at the beginning of the year.
I thought he looked good. His first 5, 6, 7 games. And 9 points minus 30. You can run through his numbers. It was just a bad year. But I tell you this, he's very young and he is talented. We have seen in spurts, flashes. Not this year, but in previous years, flashes where he can be really good. So you do run the risk.
Yeah.
If you move along from him of looking very silly. There is a risk. Yeah. It might be a small risk given he's had enough time maybe to show what he can do here. But again, he's coming off a lot of inactivity from hockey. And so maybe our expectations weren't right for him. Maybe it was the wrong year to have no practice time for a player like that. He really needed practice time. So again, this is right back to my original comment for Chuck Fletcher. It's with Nolan Patrick, I think, is the poster child for it. How much stock do you put in this season for these young players?
Okay.
And as far as the Girouxs and Voraceks and Couturiers and the veterans, not Couturier quite as much, although he's getting there, but Voracek and Giroux, I mean, we have to expect decline at some point from the age they're getting. So, there's question marks there too. Those are more normal ones for a general manager. When do you move on from a player as a veteran? But the other question to me is the question that really determines what direction the Flyers go in the offseason is how much stock does he put in this lost season for so many of these young players? Because if it's full stock, like it's a regular normal season, and he says, listen, they had 56 games, and it's not 82, but that's enough. If that's the case, this could be a completely different looking team come September. If on the other hand, and given what his coach said, you might think he might lean this way, that it's unfair to judge a lot of these guys who needed that year of development, you needed that year of practice in particular, and got none of it basically, then he might not be as harsh in his judgments, and he may hang on to these guys and give them next year. Now, he doesn't have a choice with Sanheim. He's a free agent. He's got to make a decision there. With Patrick, to some degree, I think Nolan's got very little bargaining power. So, but and Carter Hart, there are some contractual issues that he has to settle here too. So, but from a general standpoint of moving forward, be very interesting. How much can he bring in to change the team? They definitely need another veteran defenseman. We saw that.
Yeah,
I
preferably
do
one that
think
shoots
there are some
right-handed.
internal solutions, but we do need to have a coach who trusts young players. And there are times when AV, it seemed like you really had to force him to really to compliment young players. Like Wade Allison, to me, late in this year, deserved all kinds of praise. I don't
Agreed.
care. Now, when he first came up, the games did mean something. I know AV later on said, I don't put a lot of stock in these games that are meaningless. But when he first came up, first of all, the Flyers were still alive. Second
Yep.
of all, many of his games outside of the ones against New Jersey were against teams who had something to play for. So they were meaningful games in that regard. Washington and the Islanders and those games, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, and yep.
So and he played well in those games. So to me, I would have liked a lot of this guy's got a chance. I don't want to talk so much about him that you make him get a big head and he comes into camp overweight and all that. You can certainly walk the tightrope, but to say
Right.
that by playing as well as he did, I mean, he was an absolute breath of fresh air, I thought, for this team with his energy, with his physicality, his skill, just his attitude on the bench,
Yes.
all that.
Agreed.
I think this team needs that. And
Yes.
I was surprised with the tempered praise that he got. I also thought that Cam York, in a very small sample size, but showed me that this is the potential guy that can run the Flyers power play.
Well, I'll tell you
just-
what, Jim. I watched a lot of Cam York in for college hockey. I specifically wanted to follow what he was doing this year at Michigan for Cam York, because I watched him play in the World Juniors, right? And so I wanted to really watch him play in Michigan. And I'll tell you what, this guy is a real deal. Okay, he really is. He plays,
but
he plays so much more mature than
we
what he
don't
really
know
is.
college to the NHL. It's a huge jump.
Oh, I
mean,
agree.
I saw him. I watched every game of the World Juniors. He was outstanding, but it's the World Juniors, and World Juniors is higher level than college. So I'm not saying junior is higher level than college, but World Juniors is the
Yes.
best of the best. So
Yes.
that to me proved this guy's got a shot. Then he was very good, and again a small sample size in the AHL. So he comes up, plays 3 games, and it's. I'm not going to put too much stock. As AV said, these games were very late in the year, but it was still NHL play. It was still games, the first couple against a team that had something to play for.
And he didn't look out of place, though.
He looked, to be honest with you, he looked out of place in a good way in terms of his ability to make that first pass, to avoid the first forechecker, his ability to run the power play when he got his chances to do that. But, he's not the biggest guy. There were times in the games where he got overrun. He's not perfect, but I did see things in his game that were very impressive. I certainly saw things from Wade Allison. Tanner Lazinski, before he went down, I thought showed you some good things too. So there are some possible internal options to some of the depth players. Eventually, Wade Allison and Cam York might not be depth players. Wade Allison might have enough skill to be in a top 6 kind of guy, and Cam York certainly might be a top 4 defenseman. Yeah. So there was some good there, but again, I really think the future, and as far as Chuck Fletcher goes, because those guys all don't have to be protected; they're all coming back. It's those the young guys that were graduating to veteran status this year. That's really the crux of it to me. What happens to them in this offseason, if anything, and more importantly, if they are still here, was this year kind of a mirage?
Yeah.
Or was last year the mirage? I mean, it's a tough call for Chuck. It really is. He does not have an easy decision.
You mentioned a lot of the young players. This is what I wanted to get into as part of the positivity moving forward. This is exactly what I wanted to talk about and get into. And you mentioned something during one of the games that Cam York played. During your broadcast, you had mentioned that Cam York slows the play down to himself. Okay. Yeah. And that right there is very telling to me about a player, especially in his position and what he's doing. When somebody like you can notice something like that about that kind of player, that to me says a lot about that player. And after watching him through the World Juniors and then through playing at Michigan, everything like that, hearing you say that really just kind of solidified the fact that I really believe that Cam York is going to be exactly what you said. One of those type of defenders that the Philadelphia Flyers are really going to need and want to go with moving forward.
Well, I
I
mean, he's
like,
20 years old too. That's the
yeah,
part that was impressive to me. A person of that age and inexperience that had enough confidence to be able to slow an NHL game down to his pace.
see
And that
exactly.
was in the first game. The second game, he got they went after him.
Yep, he got rocked.
And and the NHL, they scout you. They see that he likes to use the wall. It won't be a constant climb like this. We know that, but I think there's a lot there with Cam York. I do.
I agree. I agree. I'm also very impressed too with what Moran was able to do and coming in this year as well. After two ACLs, having a really tough time to try to make it into the NHL for one, and then being able to play meaningful games for the Flyers. Did you like Sam Moran? Do you like his game? Do you think he's somebody that's going to be sticking around a little bit more?
He was a free agent, unrestricted free agent, due to the way his contract works and the length of time he's been around. He's a great story of the year. I mean, his goal to beat the Rangers was one of my personal highlights of the year, because he worked so hard. I mean, this kid, a lot of players would have given up after the first knee surgery, let alone the second, and he's had other injuries. And he's been told he's going to be a forward, which you can tell he didn't like, but whatever it took.
And he was out there doing it.
Yep. But it's interesting. There were a couple of games early on where he looked like he might be able to be a regular NHL defenseman, and he supplies something the Flyers don't have a lot of, which is that physicality and that intimidation kind of thing, which still exists in the game. But there were also times where he really struggled defensively. So I don't know where we're at with Sam. You've got Igor Zamula, you've got Cam York, you've got the guys who are here. You're probably going to go out and get a veteran defenseman. I don't know where there's a spot for Sam. You're going to probably lose a defenseman. You may lose Ghost in the expansion draft. You may lose Myers, however they're going to go with that. But there's still quite a bit of players on D, which is why they were moving him to forward in the first place. And then
Yeah.
They started underperforming, and all of a sudden, okay, we're going to put you back on D. He actually went back because of injuries in Lehigh Valley and got a chance and played pretty well. And I would love to see Sam Moran become a regular NHL defenseman, because no one's paid as many dues as he has. So let's hope it happens. If it's not here, somewhere else, but let's hope, because he's a great kid who has worked so hard and just loves the game, and he deserves a shot.
I agree 100%. I felt that he was also a breath of fresh air for the team when he was able to come in and play, and being able to see him during warmups with his one knee down at the red line there, chirping across the thing. As a Flyers fan, that's what we're all about, right? We're all about that, making sure that you understand what side of the ice you're supposed to be on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Sam likes to look for dance partners. There's no doubt about
that. No doubt about that. So now, what did you think about the fact that because of COVID and because of all the protocols that were in place, we didn't get to see a lot of the junior leagues play this year, and you personally were completely wrapped up in that as well too, with going on, not being able to see as many games as you probably would have liked to have seen as well too. So now that we're getting to that point now where the draft is going to be coming up, and you started to see a lot of these players like our draft picks, Tyson Forrester playing for the Phantoms, Wade Allison started playing for the Phantoms, and Zade Wisdom has been playing well on the Phantoms, and these guys have been playing for the Phantoms now because there's none of these junior leagues. So do you think that was a good thing for them to do that, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, given the option of not playing at all, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
And neither of those two guys clearly were overwhelmed. I mean, Forster had a good run scoring goals, and Wisdom got all high grades. I did not see many Phantoms games this year, but everybody I talked to who saw them said that he was a very impressive player, not just because he had his little surge of goal scoring there early, but just his overall game.
Yeah.
Are they ready for the NHL? No. They're kids still. And let's hope the injury to Forster isn't serious. His shoulder looks
Yeah.
like he'll be recovered in time for next year. I absolutely, the options they had was to not play at all or to play in the A. It might end up being good for them since neither of them got overwhelmed. Your fear is for someone of that age that they get so badly overwhelmed that it stunts their growth in some way.
Right.
And those two contributed too much, I think, as Phantoms to say that happened. So I think it turned out to be a positive.
Okay, so do you think then let's just focus on those two players then, because they did come up and play extremely well for the AHL. Do you think that because it didn't necessarily stunt their growth, that's going to maybe help fast track them more so that they'll play on the AHL team this next coming season then?
Could. I did not see enough of them to make any kind of assessment, but I'm sure the scouts, I'm sure Red Flair, and I'm sure Chuck saw them a lot, seeing them a lot now as the AHL season continued past the NHL season. At least seeing Phantoms in general. They're not seeing Forster anymore because of the injury, of course. But, I just think that they're still going to be really young next year. They'll come to camp, I'm assuming, and see how they do in camp. Wisdom was really good in camp last year, so I would expect him to be great this year. But it's funny how that goes. I remember Zamula's first camp was better than his second camp. I remember Sanheim's first camp better than his second camp. I can remember
Terwinski was the same way.
Konechny. Yeah, a lot of these guys, that first camp, maybe it's just because you're so full of energy, it's better than the next one. We always expect progression. It doesn't always happen. But they're really young players still, so I think they're just going to let the growth go there. Forster's got skating things that I think are going to be worked on. Wisdom is just about, I think, basically honing his game. But I love the energy he brings too. And there is certainly a place for that on this team. So we'll see. I wouldn't be counting on those players, though. I think that
No, I wouldn't either.
Possibly to be back in junior next year. We got to see how it all flushes out. Canada's still got all kinds of issues. So, it's this pandemic's so uneven. I mean, there was a time, and the reason the bubbles were both in Canada, that Canada was doing great with it, and the U.S. was struggling, and now it's kind of role reversed.
The opposite,
so,
yeah. So, okay, well, there you go. Now, with what the Flyers were able to do or not able to do this year, given the upcoming draft and then also the expansion draft, okay, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. Let's go with the regular draft first because that's going to happen first.
I think the expansion draft is first, is it not?
I couldn't remember. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it is. I think the expansion draft happens like 3 days before the real draft.
Because I thought it was the other way.
Yeah,
I thought it was the other way.
It could be the other way. But for some reason I had on my schedule something about the 21st maybe for the expansion draft, and then 23rd and 24th for the entry draft.
Well, let's break out our crack research team here.
There you go. Go to the cloud.
NHL Draft 2021. And let's see here. July 23rd and the 24th.
Right. Now I think
that's for the no, this is for regular draft.
Right. Now do the expansion draft. I think the expansion draft's the 21st, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. 20th, 21st, somewhere around there.
It is. Yep, you're right. July 21st. So it's a couple days before.
A big part of that. Remember with what Vegas did with the draft pick, not taking certain players and giving draft picks. And I mean, George McPhee played that like a maestro, and they ended up going to the finals. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's a busy week. You've got the expansion draft, then the entry draft, then you've got 3-4 days later free agency. So it's going to be a real busy time.
Okay, so then we'll do the expansion draft first, since that's going to happen first. Who do you think is gonna? I mean, look, this is all just speculation here because we're not privy to what's going on in Chuck's head and everything like that. But who do you think potentially could be on the list of players that might be exposed or might be selected or something like that from the expansion draft?
Now, I've seen several models of how this works. One says you get to protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and a goalie, right?
Right.
The other, I saw 8 skaters of any kind and a goalie. So if my math is correct, if you decide to protect 4 defensemen, you lose 2 players, right? You lose
a forward and a goalie.
8, right? I think that's the case.
That's what I've been seeing too.
Yeah. So most teams, I'm assuming, I only protect 3D because they don't want to give up 2 spots. If the Flyers had to protect 3D, it would be, one would assume, Provorov, Sanheim, and Myers.
Moran. Well, no, Moran's not signed.
Moran.
Never mind.
He's a free agent. Yeah. Sanheim's a restricted free agent, but they'll have to protect him. So, I mean, Provorov, Sanheim, Myers.
Obviously, Provorov. Yeah. Obviously, Sanheim.
So you've got 4 there. If they decide to go 4, then they can only protect 4 forwards. So I think they probably go
and
7.
You have to protect you have to protect G because he has a no trade clause.
Right.
Right. And who's
Hayes as well. Hayes has a no move. Hayes has a no move as well.
Right. So those 2 you have to protect because they have no movement clauses.
Right.
So now that leaves 2 more.
Model where you protect 4D, you're down to 2 forwards.
Right. So if we protect 4D, who's the other 2 forwards?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going 4D. So the way I'm looking at it is, I think Shane Gostisbehere will be left unprotected. Now,
I agree.
He is not. Myers will be. To me, Myers, with the much less cap hit, younger player, is going to get picked up. I mean, the guy is loaded with talent. I know he's coming off a tough year. Ghost, really, this wouldn't have even been a question if Ghost hadn't had a really good year, in my opinion. Now, in a year in which he was scratched, he was waived, cleared waivers, had COVID, had an injury, and I'm saying it was a good year. But when he played a lot like the Ghost that we saw 2-3 years ago and in his rookie year. He's never going to be a defensive defenseman. Get that out of your head. He's never going to be a guy
exactly
out there when you're up by a goal.
That's right.
Late in the game. But he is going to be a guy you put out there when you're down a goal late in the game, and he's going to be a guy. He's
going to be the guy out there that you can put quarterback in your power play too.
Right. So I think by the fact that he played well for the most part when he got his chances, he at least worked himself back into the conversation of being protected. But in the long run, his age now, getting into his late 20s, $4.5 million cap hit for 2 more years, I believe.
Yeah.
Myers is more affordable. He's younger. He's controllable. I think Ghost is less likely to be picked than Myers. So you probably put the player that's less likely to be picked out there. They're going to have to pick somebody, though, from the team. So it might very well be Ghost. If I'm Seattle, I love Shane Gostisbehere. $4.5 million for a guy who can run my power play. Okay, you might use him at even strength as a 5 or a 6, but he can run my power play at $4.5 million.
I'm all over that too.
There you go. Yeah,
I'm all over that too. So that's kind of what I was thinking too. Where if you do that extra defenseman, now you're cutting down your forward list.
I think that's the way it goes. I mean, I've seen so many models; it seems to get confusing. But I tried to ask when we were talking about this the people in the know, like, so you lose 2 spots if you protect an extra defenseman. You go from 10 skaters to 8. That seems harsh. It does make it interesting. I thought you might lose 1. I didn't think you'd lose 2.
Right.
That's the way. I believe it's 7 and 3, or 8. 7 or 3 defensemen and a goalie, and 8.
If you do 4 and 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So but anyway, you look at it, you're going to lose a player. You have to lose a player. So somebody's going to go. I think they may leave Jake with his contract unprotected. I obviously they're going to protect Couturier. They're going to protect, one would assume, Konechny. They have to protect Giroux, Hayes. So there are 4 forwards. You're up to Lindblom. I think with his very affordable contract now, would be protected. Nolan Patrick, interesting. I mean,
he's a restricted free agent.
He would be a Flyer, though. Flyer, not in terms of the team, but for a Seattle team, here's this guy who's a 2nd overall pick, who's dirt cheap salary-wise right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's going to be. They're going to
So
be
let me ask
interesting
you
to
another
see.
strange question then. If they do,
Scott
if
Lawton, another one.
if yeah, Scott. Oh man, oh well, because we all know what happened the last time that expansion draft came around. Scott Lawton was protected, and now he's actually re-signed with a contract as well too. So
A very
uh,
affordable contract for a player who is one of the few you can probably say this year, and he had a long drought, I know, but he still did so many other things. Led the team in hits, led the team in plus minus.
I mean,
Uh,
yeah,
he's one of the guys that everybody in the room loves. Um, brings a lot that you don't see in numbers to the table. So again, he's another player that an expansion team would probably love to get. So it's going to be fascinating to see who they protect.
I agree. I agree, and and I can understand now why they're trying to limit the damage, because I think with what a lot of people were saying was that most of the GMs were caught off guard a little bit by the last expansion draft, where they weren't quite sure about who they could and couldn't protect. And Vegas was able to swoop in and grab, some pretty darn good players. I'm not saying that Seattle's not going to get some good players because they're gonna. You can't help, but you can't protect everybody. So they're going to
Yeah,
get some good players.
it's still, I think, as much as they made great selections, and they did. I mean, Carlson and Marchessault and some of these guys, but they also made some great deals.
Yes.
Got them players. They gave up some picks to allow to tell teams to leave a guy unprotected. We're going to take him, and did vice versa, where they
Right.
choose a guy. It's going to be interesting to see how Seattle plays it. They have huge. You can't get much better than Vegas did in their first year, except win the cup.
No, I guess not.
So I don't know how Seattle can meet those expectations, but and as you say, I think now GMs are they've been, most of the GMs, some are new, but the ones who are still here from that expansion draft, they learned, and they'll be better prepared for it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. But I also think that with Ron Francis up there in Seattle, I think they're going to be more of a not necessarily gearing to win right now, to where he's going to probably use a lot of the assets that he selects from these teams as draft picks to try to get draft picks and go that way. It just because that's his MO, you know what I mean? That's how he built Carolina and everything like that too. So.
Yeah, the problem he has though is this is such an uncertain draft, right?
Yeah.
So there will be draft picks maybe looking forward as opposed to this year's draft because, as you say, there just hasn't been much junior hockey. Even the college seasons were truncated. What is out there? We don't really know. I mean, it's just going to be a draft similar to the NFL, where the NFL had a draft where they had players picked high who didn't even play this year, who opted out. So it's going to be a little bit of a strange draft, and I would assume next year's draft will be loaded as players, who weren't able to play this year.
Yeah,
say I'm going to get another year junior. So it will be quite interesting to see how Seattle plays it. But if they look for picks this year, it's such an uncertain draft. I'm not sure they'll have as much incentive to do that.
I'm with you on that. I agree. I just really would like to see the Flyers make some of those decisions that for the players moving forward and for the team moving forward, I would like to see those decisions made a little bit more. I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for how I feel about this season, because I feel like there was mistakes made all the way around, not just on players' parts, but I think general managers and coaching, and I just feel that there was no accountability. And why I say that is because no heads rolled. Everybody seemed like it was, look, I understand that this was a different year, and I understand it was difficult, and I understand there was no practice time. You know what I mean? And I understand that. Okay. And I'm not taking away from any of those kinds of things, but the rest of the league had to deal with that too. Okay. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Different levels of it, as I said earlier. But what head did you want to roll? I mean, We don't know yet. We're going to find out about what players' heads roll, because if they make moves and they trade players, that that's the decision they made to move on from those players. From the coaching staff, I mean, just please don't be serious. The guy was one of the best coaches in the league the year before. He's won over 700 games. He has one of the most experienced staffs in the league.
See, that's why I'm questioning that.
For the people who get out there and it's got to get rid of a new coach.
Oh no,
Carter Hart. It's like, please, Carter Hart this is the one guy you've got to. You don't have another Carter Hart around, so
exactly
you have to basically get him better. And I think it really is the case with many of the other younger players too, but certainly it's the case with Carter Hart.
Yes,
that if the team's going where it wants to go, you've got to move on. I see all these things on Twitter from people saying, blow it up, trade Carter Hart, do this. Do you know how long it's going to take to get back to where you want to get if you blow it up? You have these young players, and you've got to figure out which of them, if not all of them, or if not any of them, but which of them you want to move forward with, how much stock do you want to put in this season? Again, their season was a little different than some of the other teams. They had an absolute COVID outbreak that shut them down and put their schedule into an area that was really difficult. And if you noticed, I put this panel up in one of our broadcasts late in the year, the 5 youngest teams in the NHL, not a sniff of the playoffs. The young teams were impacted more by the heavy schedule than the older teams. And that makes complete sense. Look at the Flyers players. The Flyers veteran players had better seasons than their younger players, which it should have been going in the other direction. The younger players should have been taking the next step and maybe even taking over the team. We all expected that to some degree. It didn't happen. So I'm not saying that Alain Vigneault's theory is completely 100% there, but I think there is some truth to the fact that lack of practice time really affected this team. It affected some of the other younger teams throughout the league. Did it affect the Washington Capitals, the oldest team in the league? No. Did it affect the Pittsburgh Penguins, another team that's not very young? No. So you look for trends. The trend I'm seeing, their veteran teams, for the most part, are really successful. Now, Carolina's a pretty young team. They got a little older here over the last year or two with some acquisitions, but they're a pretty young team. But I don't think Carolina, did they have any kind of COVID situation this year?
They did at the beginning of the year for a little bit, just a small one. And then Mrazek was out for a period of time due to injury. Yeah.
COVID outbreak, not because of the impact COVID has on the players. That's a whole nother thing. I have no idea. None of us do. I'm talking about the impact it had on the schedule.
Yes.
Then what was already a very compacted schedule got ridiculously so. And I know because I was doing the games. I mean, I never have had a season where I felt like I was doing a game one after another after another. And 17 in 29 days was the busiest stretch I've ever seen in my time Flyers. That's, if you think about it, that's 5 days less than a game every other day.
Pretty much.
That's every other day, but 5 back-to-backs. So that's just, if things start going the wrong way during the stretch like that, it's tough to right the ship.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on here is that I'm trying to see the trends, and yet I see that there's lack of certain things that are not able to fix the trends. You know what I mean? So if you start getting into a bad way, like with Carter Hart was a perfect example. This year he kind of got in a bad way because he was trying to redo some things on his game and he was trying to learn some different techniques or whatever the case was. And then this was the first year he actually faced some adversity. He has won at every level that he's been at. And this was the first time he actually had to face some adversity where he wasn't winning. He wasn't stopping the puck like he was before. You know what I mean? And so I just want to my main thing is this, Jim. I just want to see better decision making. Okay. I want to see the team do the things they need to do. And I'm really hoping that with this year coming, that with a full off season, that players will be able to have access to get in shape, stay in shape.
Not going to happen in Canada. So that's why I think AV went with that on the postseason press. I think he was trying to his players that if you're Canadian, you look at what's happening up there, you might consider staying in the U.S. for your summer so that you can train properly. I think that might have been part of the message that he was given there.
Yeah.
I asked him about Joe Farabee 2 or 3 days from the end of the season, and this was in our this was not in a group Zoom. This was when it was just the announcers, and we were talking to him, and he said, "I've got a theory on that," and obviously he told us that theory that Joel is an American, and he trained in America, was able to find training much
he put 17 pounds on. Yeah.
So again, there is evidence that AV's theory does hold water. Clearly, there are going to be those out there who feel as though it's just excuse making. But for this to go so far off the track that we all saw it going on, I'm looking for any kind of rationale, and that one does seem to have some validity. So we'll see. Now next year, that the bluff is called. If it was a bluff, I don't think it is, but they're going to have practice. They're going to have a full off season, but much closer to it, 1 month less than a usual off season.
Right.
And they're going to have a full training camp. So we will, and then hopefully a schedule that allows for practice. So if the team gets off to a terrible start, I understand where there will be a lot of pressure to look at the coaching. But
so that was going to be my next question there for you, though, Jim.
What's that?
If that will be my next question then for you. If they come out next year and just not hit on all cylinders and have
what happens though? I mean, if they've made a whole bunch of changes, you're going to have to give them a little time to mix it all together. If it's pretty much minus a player lost in the expansion draft, maybe a veteran added here or there. If it's pretty much the same group of players with the same coaches and you get the same results as you did this year for a month or two into next year, I think absolutely anything is on the table.
Okay.
But that's thinking, Ron. It could also be that they make a couple moves, maybe add a top 4 defenseman. You get some of these younger players, Allison and some of these other guys, to add to the mix, change things up a little bit from within as well. And Carter Hart, of course, without saying, Carter Hart has to bounce back. If he bounces back, this team, I said it on the air, and of course, immediately got some Twitter hate for it, but they're not that far away. This is not it was far away a year ago, and they haven't changed very much. Why would they be far away now? They weren't being carried by, if you thought this team is carried by Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek and the guys who are now over 30, then yeah, there's concern that it's going in the wrong direction. But the key to this team, as we all saw last season, not this most recent season, the last season before that, was that the young players were taking the team over. And another guy, by the way, who has to bounce back is Kevin Hayes. He's a veteran.
Big time.
He's one of these, maybe the only veteran I can think of that I would say was below expectations this year. Is there somebody else I'm missing? Really? I mean,
no, you know what? Because G had a really good year. I mean, he had what?
Couturier.
Yeah.
Elliott, the veterans, Lawton, you could consider a veteran now. I mean, the guys who are 27 and older, outside of Kevin Hayes, pretty much played as expected or maybe even a little bit better.
Agreed.
I'm not sure we can expect that. Some of these guys are getting to the age now where you have to expect it to start going the other way. So it has to be not the Cam Yorks and the Wade Allisons. They can't be counted on. They might add a little to the mix next year, but it's got to be that core group of youngsters that are in their mid-20s now. That's no longer young. That's middle-aged. Right. It's not old, but that's when you're supposed to have your peak years, basically 24 through 28 or so.
Exactly.
Those guys have got to get back to where they were in 2019, 2020, as opposed to 2020, 2021. So, and that is, I think, how next year will hinge. Now, the only caveat I say to that is if Chuck decides and puts a lot of stock into this season and changes everything up, and Travis Konechny is traded, or Travis Sanheim is traded, or some of this core is mixed and changed, well, then it's a complete change. You've got to give the coaching staff a little time to try to get that team together.
Right.
So really, I can't say if we talk in mid-November, let's say, and the team's not off to a great start, and you come back and say, well, now you said if the team got off to a bad start.
Oh, no, I would never.
No, but if you said that, I mean, you have every right to if it's the same group of players. But if they make a whole bunch of changes, you got to give the coaching staff a little time to get them going. As you recall, in AV's first year, the team, and again, had a hellacious schedule. We had to go to Europe, then come back away.
But did well.
Once they got past mid-December, and then they had the Oscar situation happen. But they got into late December, into January, they took off. And from really, even with a dip in December after they found out about Oscar, from I believe it was November 13th to the pause in March, they had the second most points in the league. So
yes, sir.
He got him going eventually. So I think you got to give him a little time. But I do understand if not many changes are made, where the fan base will be expecting some big time changes if they don't get off to a good start. So, but it all depends on what they do here in the offseason.
Which is why I said at the very beginning, what they do this offseason is going to affect this team for the next 5 years.
It will. I mean, if they make a lot of moves, it certainly does in and of itself. If they don't make a lot of moves, and it means it's either going to be successful because these players bounce back, or if they don't bounce back, then these moves will eventually be made, or maybe coaching.
Exactly.
So, it's going to be. It is. There's no way around it. It's an important offseason for this team.
Yes.
I just know that going into most off seasons where you don't make the playoffs, it's like, okay, I have this area I got to improve, this area I got to improve, this area I got to improve. Well, you could look at this year's team and certainly say that they need to improve their defense, they need to improve their penalty killing, they need to improve, maybe their physicality. So, but there's that caveat of how much stock do you put in this year?
Yeah,
and that's hanging over everything for Chuck and for all GMs of these teams that didn't make the playoffs. So, and had to go through COVID. So, it's a lot, as they say.
Yes, it is.
We'll see. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to watch. That's for sure.
He's got $11.25 million in cap space that he'll be able to play with a little bit. So that's going to give him some room to potentially bring in one of those veteran D-men, or maybe even a veteran.
Before they sign Carter Hart, correct? Before they sign
This is all before Carter Hart signed or anything like that.
Did you take Sanheim and Hart's salaries from this year off of that list?
Yes.
Before you came up with that figure?
Yes.
Yeah, so they have 11.2, but they have Sanheim and Hart. They got to sign.
Okay, so that's why you're jumping ahead of me there, Jim.
I'm saying a lot of people are going that way with the salary cap, and you're justified. I understand what you're saying, but I do think they're going to have to lose some salary, and maybe they lose through the expansion draft, but they're going to have to lose some salary in order to make the big time acquisition.
Exactly.
You're talking, this is a free agent. Now they can make trades. You can still make player trades now, but they have to be
ahead of me. You're jumping ahead of me.
matching right with the salaries.
Well,
so
what I was just going to say was the fact that they do have some cap space. They are going to need to sign Carter Hart. They are going to need to redo some contracts and things like that. And they are going to have to lose some salary in order for this team to offer somebody any kind of serious contract. You know what I'm saying? Because let's face it, Carter Hart's going to need to be re-signed. Now, I don't think that we're necessarily going to be backing up the Brinks truck for him for this contract. Like, if he would have continued to play like he did last year and just continue to elevate, then yes, we would be backing up the Brinks truck. But I think he's going to get a bridge deal to where it's not going to be as expensive as they initially thought. So there's still going to be some wiggle room there for management to try to get other players in or to do some other things with the cap. So
he's still going to be most likely $3 to $4 million more than he's making now.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, and Travis Sanheim's going to get a raise.
They're
going to have to find a backup goalie if it's not Brian Elliott. It's probably
that's the other thing too. A backup goalie needs to come in as well.
Than Brian was very cheap this year.
Yeah.
Again,
that money goes away quick, don't it?
It will go fast, but I just say Chuck's got a lot of decisions to make. And he knows that. And it's going to be interesting. Remember, he is the guy who brought people forget this, but the guy who won the Kirill the Thrill was a Chuck Fletcher draft pick, was he not?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. It's not. And again, the first draft.
Can we trade him and bring him?
I don't think he's available. Just a hunch that he's not available.
Probably.
But you look at it, the first draft he had was Cam, and And I think the drafts
I
are.
like his draft picks. I like his draft picks.
It's early. It's early, but
yeah,
we'll see on that. And the players who drop back are all guys that were here before he was here, and expectations were they were going to move forward. So really, ultimately, eventually, unless he breaks this thing completely up, and he could, but unless he does that, next year to me hinges on Carter Hart, Travis Sanheim, Phil Myers, Travis Konechny, Nick Aubé-Kubel, Oscar Lindblom, Nolan Patrick, if they're all still here, taking not only a step up from this year, but going back to the season past and a step up that year.
Yes.
If they do that, and you're still getting decent contributions from the veterans, which you should get more from Hayes and similar from Couturier, and pretty close to the same. I don't think Jake Voracek actually by the end of the year was really skating well. I didn't see age as a problem for him. Gee, they're you're going to have to. He's going to be 34 next year. But if you get basically contributions from them, this team absolutely can be in the playoffs next year. So I know people are. That's the way we are in Philly. We jump, we jump on what happened yesterday, and it colors our opinion about everything. But this team is not that far away. I do think if the right moves are made, they can supplement it a little bit. This team will be back in the playoffs, which wouldn't be a surprise because it's an even year, right?
Yeah. So next year we're slated.
Make it in 22. You got to make it in 23.
Yeah, right. Wow. Well, there you have it, folks. This is what I wanted to do, Jim. I just wanted to give you a platform so that we could get.
I'm not looking for platforms. These are just my opinion. No.
But I wanted to hear your take on the end of the season with the questions that I wanted to ask you, because we heard all your broadcasts and what you thought of the team, but I just wanted to get your take on what you thought about the season and see where I was at as far as that's concerned. You definitely helped to open my eyes to a lot of different things and help me to consider other things as well too. I try not to look at it with the fan eyes. I try to look at it as the analytical eyes.
Let me say this. I appreciate the passion of Flyers fans. I love it. It's one of the reasons why I'm so happy I made the choice to come here as opposed to go work in Anaheim when I first came into the NHL. Right. I mean, Anaheim's won a cup. We haven't, but I'm still very happy I came here because it's just the passion. I love it. But passion has to be guided in the right direction sometimes too. And I also think all of us who cover the team need to be very careful not to overstate the influence of those who speak out on social media. That's not all Flyer fans. There are many Flyer fans who do not have a Twitter account. There are many Flyer fans who do not get their opinion out there in social media. So when people who talk on social media, for the most part, and it's human nature, right, are speaking out when they're not happy. That's just nature. I mean, there are some that tweet out, "I'm so happy." Yes, you get that. But I'd say the percentage leans heavily more toward people who have a complaint to get out there, and so they get it out on social media. So it's very important, and that's social media it's there for that. They can go ahead and do it. They have every right. But what I'm saying is, for those of us who cover the team, I don't think we have to be careful not to put too much stock in what we see in social media as what all Flyer fans think. I do think there are a lot of Flyer fans out there who do think big picture and don't think that when a guy has a bad game, he's got to get traded the next day.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
So there are a lot of Flyer fans I talk to who I know, I see at the Wawa, who think that way. So it's very important for you. It's important for me. It's important for all the people who cover it. I see it filter into articles about the team. I think it filters in sometimes. I'm watching a game and after the game, I try not to look at any social media outside of informational social media.
Right.
Comments. I try not to look at comments and things during a game because I don't want anything to color what I'm saying. But after a game, I'll watch, and if it's a loss, I know I've got to be strong mentally going into it because I'm going to see a lot of negativity toward me as much as the team and whatever. But I always say to myself, follow your own advice here. These people who are getting their opinions out there are not necessarily representing all of Flyer fandom.
That's
so,
right.
I do think next year there's going to be a ton of enthusiasm, mainly because we can have hopefully a full house. And the
Yes.
fans all back and
Yes.
things be normal. I think there will be certainly a group, a large segment that will be ready to really get upset if the team doesn't get off to a good start. I understand that. But I do think we all have to temper our assessments of where Flyer fans are at and not judge it all on what we see in social media. That's
well, thank you for helping me see some of that. Okay. And for maybe directing me to see some of the more look at the real game itself. Ever since I've had the opportunity to go to the classes with you and everything like that, I've tried to do that in everything that I do. I try to look at things more with an eye of, okay, there's always two sides to the story. You're only seeing the one side. So just because you're only seeing the one side, that doesn't mean that the other side doesn't exist. You have to take into account that other side exists. So
there's always two sides.
Always.
Sometimes, even though it's not possible, three sides. You really have to. I mean, I know a lot of people will hear what I'm saying and say, "Hey, it's just a mouthpiece for the organization." I mean, I said plenty critical here today too.
Yes.
I just told you my opinions. I try to base my opinions on fact.
Me too.
And I try to base my opinions on people who know more than me that I've talked to. So that's basically what you got from me today. And by the way, camps, we're gonna have summer camps this year on the broadcast coaching, more group sessions, little less expensive, but not quite as one-on-one. But these are going to be groups where we talk about the business and such.
So that's going to be my next thing for you.
Gonna roll those out pretty soon. Yeah,
man, that's what I wanted to ask you. That was another reason why I wanted to have you on here, was because now that the season is over, right? So now we're taking off our hockey lid, right? And we're putting on the other lid, right? And so now that hockey season's over for the Flyers, okay. Now you've probably been watching some of the plays.
Over also, Steel, for me picking any team correctly in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
4 so far. So
yeah, don't look to me to be for prognostication. That's not my thing. I just do it for fun. So
yeah, there is of the 4 majors, and soccer. I guess there's 5 majors now. I'm not as familiar with soccer, but of the other 4 sports, this is the hardest one to predict. It's just,
it is.
I mean, it's just all over the map. I mean, the games were great. It's been fun to watch. I'm diving back into baseball. Is the first time in 15 years that I've just kind of, once the Flyers are eliminated or their season ends, I move on and I don't get to watch as much of the playoffs. I'm really going to watch this year and really enjoyed the action, but not the results. According to
I'm with you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that too, because this is actually too my first year where I'm actually going to be watching a lot more of the other games, because even though the Flyers aren't in, I'm going to be watching a lot more of the other games and paying more attention to it. It's also becoming an occupational hazard, I guess. But so now that the Flyers are up, what's that?
You have to now.
Exactly.
So show.
And it's taken off and it's doing really well, and I get to be privileged and honored to have great guests like you to be on. So
you should be very happy and proud of yourself for the way your show has taken off.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I take high praise from such a great mentor that I look to you as, and a great person that I look to when I have doubts and I see and you're able to say those kinds of things and make the corrections. And so, but now that you're going to be having some time, you're going to be restarting the school, right?
I am. It's really didn't stop. We continued with individual sessions, but the schedule, which we've already talked about, was so condensed. It was hard for me to even fit. I did a couple a month the last 2 or 3 months, and enjoyed them thoroughly. But this summer, what we're going to do is we're going to have a monthly camp, basically June, July, August.
Oh, nice.
Where we, it's going to be. I've had a lot of kids, and it really pained me to have kids who just couldn't afford the other deal. But this will be helpful to them, and I'll get a lot of the information out. And then if they choose, we can do the one-on-ones moving on from that. But we're going to have camps in June, July, August. The dates are pretty well set. We're going to have information out on those.
You have to let me know.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested, it's jjbroadcastingcoaching@gmail.com. Just send me an email, and I'm going to be putting the information out social media and emailing all those that were interested, because a lot of kids were interested in the one-on-ones, just couldn't afford it. And it always bothered me when I told them, I've already done this for so many people, I can't start discounting it because it's not fair to them. So this is different. It's a group setting. It's going to be a one-day thing, and I'm basically going to have a camp for.
Wow, that would be awesome.
Yeah, first session will be for. Well, I'm not sure the order yet, but one session will be for kids in high school or even junior high up to maybe the end of high school.
Wow.
The other session will be for the college and young pros.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, Jim, you'll have to let me know when you get those dates nailed down and everything, so we can let everybody know and everything like that. And I'll be more than happy to put a big old banner for your school on my website, so everybody can sign up through that. And it's just what's the email again?
jjbroadcastingcoaching@gmail.com.
There you go, folks. jjbroadcasting@gmail.com.
jjbroadcastingcoaching@gmail.com.
JJ Broadcasting Coaching.
Way too long, but that's what we came up with.
All right. Well, but check that out. I'll have links to all that stuff for you. You can check that out. Please check that out, because I had the distinct honor and privilege of going through that particular class. And
one of my first students, actually.
And if you want to learn from the best, this is the guy right here you learn from. So
yeah, and let me tell you, if you're like Ron, you'll need 8 sessions, because Ron talks a lot, Steel talks a lot, and so I could get through this much material with him that I'd get through this much with other people. It's like, but anyway,
because he makes up for it, because now every time he comes on to do a show, we are never done in an hour. We're never,
an hour and a half we're working on now. But no, I'm really proud of what you've done, Steel. So I call you Ron. Obviously, you hate that, Steel. But you've done great stuff with your show. You're getting sponsors. You're adding people to your network. So you're doing really well with that. I'm very proud of you.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And a lot of it I got to learn from you, not just by watching you over the many, many years that I've enjoyed you doing the broadcast, but also being in part of your class and everything like that. So that was really amazing. And if you really want to learn about broadcasting and learn how to do broadcasting, there's no better person to learn from than Jim Jackson, the voice of the Flyers. I mean, he's definitely you don't win Emmys for nothing.
Well, I do want to point out, and one thing that I probably didn't point out enough for the last group, or my first foray into this, it's not just for play-by-play, right? It's right. For people who want to anchor, who want to do sideline reporting, ringside reporting, courtside reporting. It's people who want to do sports talk shows. It's people who want to do
podcasts.
Yes, podcasts. So it really is, to me, there are certain fundamentals about broadcasting that hold for all of those. Agreed. And I've done, with the exception of podcasting, I have not done a podcast. I've done all the other stuff. I've anchored, I've reported, I've sideline reported, I've done play-by-play. So any of that, if you're interested in getting into that, I'd love to coach you.
For real. Please get involved in that, folks. Well, there you have it. This is Jim Jackson, the voice of the Philadelphia Flyers from NBC Sports Philadelphia. Thanks very much for hopping on here with us, Jim, and giving us your assessment of the Flyers this past year. Also, looking forward to the summer camps that you're going to be having for the coaching. I'll be looking forward to that as well, too. And I'll have all the links and all that and everything there. Thanks, Jim, for coming on. I'm your host, SteelFlyers. You can catch me on Twitter at SteelFlyers52, and you can check me out on the web at www.steelflyers.com. Just remember, folks, stay safe, stay strong, and hang tough.